Now I'm going to be talking about, mostly about the natural sciences and perhaps a little bit about psychology, but mostly about natural science. And that's where this basic idea comes from. So I'm going to try to explain what it is that is meant by these phrases that Dr. Yi has given us: realm 1, realm 2, and realm 3. Realm, in English, originally means a kingdom, a nation. It's a group of things that are connected in some way, belong together. So we talk nowadays for any group of things that belong together in a certain way. We call them realms. You could even talk about the realm of football, for example. But the original meaning of the word is a kingdom. So the idea is that the material world, we'll start with that. The material world, we can think of it as having three parts. And these parts we're going to call realms. And they are distinguished by several different criteria. But let me just draw you a diagram to help us get the idea. Suppose I drew a big circle like this. And this is the circle of what is really real. And what I mean by that is all those beings, existence, all those beings which exist independently of human beings. Stars, atoms, molecules, gravitational fields, all the things that exist independently of human beings. They would be there, whether human beings were there or not. So that's the first general idea. Now, nobody knows what that is. And the job of science is to find our way into this realm and try to find out what is there, what is really real. So, I'll give you an example, a very simple example. Here's the Earth spinning around. Here's Japan, here's England, and the Earth's going round. And in the Middle Ages, they realized there was all this land, Russia, India, Europe, etc. And they thought you must have an equal amount of land at the bottom to balance it. Otherwise the world's going to go like that. So they said there must be land down here. And they called that Australia. They didn't know whether it was there or not. Nobody had been there. And they thought that around the middle of the center of the Earth, there was a very, very hot, a band of very great heat around the center of the Earth. Well, you know that, don't you? Because the nearer you get to the equator, the hotter it gets. So they thought you couldn't sail down there in your ship, you'd be burnt up. But they thought that Australia must exist because it was needed to balance the weight of the Earth so it didn't wobble. So they had an idea about a being they could not observe. They couldn't go there and see whether it existed. They imagined it. So the question for science is, well, what are the really real beings? If we can imagine Australia, and we can imagine the strange, we can imagine mythical creatures, mythical animals, we can imagine dragons, and so on. Are there any such things? And so this question then of science is trying to enter into this world, the world of everything there really is, and find out what's there, what is in it. Well, fortunately for history, a Dutchman called Tasman sailed to Australia and found Mr. and Dr. Yee there and brought them, here they are back. And so fortunately Australia is real. Right? So that's just a little story to illustrate the general idea of you have to make an investigation to know what is really real. Okay. Now, we start with a very simple set of objects. Those things, the beings that we can perceive. We can perceive. So that's the first realm, the simplest realm, the one that's most obvious. What we can perceive. Just with our ordinary senses. Nothing very special about that. Our ordinary senses. We don't need any equipment. We don't need microscopes. We don't need telescopes. We don't need ships to sail there. We don't need space probes. Just look around. And we have ways of deciding whether something is an illusion, whether it's an hallucination, whether it's really real. And we collect up all the things that we can perceive. And that is a growing list of things, isn't it? We're discovering new things all the time. So that's realm one. I will underline that in red. All right. Now, what makes you think that there's anything else in the world and other than realm one, the things we can ordinarily perceive? Why do we think there's anything else there? Well, one very good reason is when we can observe something, but we don't know why it is happening. And so we have this sort of situation. We have an observation, and it might be, let us say, that we can see that someone is ill. They have a disease. Suppose we find that someone has scratched themselves and it begins to look very red and nasty. And in the middle there's some yellow stuff. It's horrible. We want to know, they've got an ulcer. We want to know, what's the explanation? Why is it that there is such a thing happening here? Well, oh no, I'm fine. I'm really just swallowing things down the wrong way. So, someone is, we want to know, what's the explanation? Why is that so? Or you go to your country house and you light the fire and the chimney, as we say, smokes. The smoke will not go up. The room gets full of smoke. You say, something must be blocking the chimney. Here's your house, your country house. There's the chimney. You light the fire, room gets full of smoke, no smoke goes up the chimney. And you say, there must be an explanation. What's the explanation? Why does the smoke not go up the chimney? Have a guess.
Explanation?
Yeah. What stops, why does, I light the fire and the smoke goes all into the room. Doesn't go up the chimney. Why do you think?
Why?
Yeah.
Because of the winds?
Yeah, a bird might have built a nest.
Yeah.
Right? So here's a bird. Bird comes in, builds a nest in the chimney, and blocks the chimney. Eh? So the smoke goes all into the house. That's a question. Now, we think that there must be something in that chimney. What do we do? Get the brush, go up and down the chimney. Down comes the nest, birds, eggs, chicks, little birds. Bird goes flapping around. Smoke goes up the chimney. Aha! We have found it. We made an inference as to the cause of something we observed, and we carried out an experiment to check whether it was there. That's a pattern of reasoning and experimenting we find in this realm, realm 1, because a bird's nest is something you can perceive. Now, the same kind of reasoning says, when someone has an illness, there's got to be something which is causing that illness. So we try to find out what it is. Suppose the illness is a fever. We get in a tropical country. Now this is a comb. Look at that. Isn't that absolutely amazing? Did you see it? Look at that. Now, isn't that extraordinary? Huh? You won't get the Nobel Prize for explaining that because that's been explained. Right? The explanation for that is that what I have done by running the comb through my dry hair is electrify it, as we say. And what does that mean? That I've altered the balance between electrons and the nuclei of atoms. And what are electrons? They are simple, active beings. They have natural activity. So an example of this would be an electron. You all know that it's a basic negative charge. You don't have any explanation of why an electron has a negative charge. It just has. It's the basic thing in electrical world. So it's -1, the basic electric charge, or minus E as we say. So that's a natural agent. The Earth is a natural agent. It's responsible for gravity. Who's played with a magnet? You know what a magnet is? You all know that? Have you got magnets on your refrigerator? Who's got magnets on the refrigerator? Right. Did you have to glue them on? No. You brought them up to the refrigerator and click, like that. You've got little animals probably, have you? Little animals? Who's got little animals on their fridge? And other little things. I don't know what you have in Japan, but in England we have little animals and things like that. And they've got magnets, go clunk. Right? Have you seen those kissing dolls? Do you have those in Japan? Why do they kiss? Well, these dolls, you bring them up to each other, and they go like that. Because they've got magnets in them. And if you've got a north pole and a magnet there, and a south pole and a magnet there, they attract each other and go like that. We give them to people in England for wedding anniversaries. Right? You must have them, I'm sure. And so, how do you explain that? Well, these poles have natural activity. Nothing is pushing them. They are naturally active. So, when we're talking here about realm 3, we have agents. And what is our method of reasoning there? Well, we are making hypotheses, theoretical hypotheses, that there are certain natural agents. What we try to do is to isolate these and see if we can manipulate them. So we have 3 different ways of gaining knowledge. by observation, by analogy, and by theoretical hypotheses about agents. So now you can see how it all connects up. There's these realms of different kinds of things, and we come to know about them in different ways, and we now understand quite a bit about how we gain knowledge. By observation, by analogy, and by hypothesis. 3 different ways of gaining knowledge. You'll never observe an electron. You can observe the effect of an electron, but you can't observe an electron. You'll never observe a magnetic pole. You can observe the effect of a magnet. If you were to dig down into that piece of iron, you wouldn't find the pole in there. If you dig down into the piece of iron and break it up, the pole disappears. So, these are things we could never perceive. Now you can see how this has an application, very direct application, to what Dr. Yu's been talking about. Where, let's label words. Big numbers. 1, 2, 3. Where would theology be? 1, or 2, or 3? Well, ask yourself, have you ever seen God? You've seen pictures of him up there, big beard sitting on his cloud, but that's not him. You've never seen God. Do you think that that picture of God, an elderly man sitting on a throne with a big white beard, is a very, do you think that's a good analogy? Sunday school, maybe. Pretty naive, isn't it? Pretty childish. You don't really believe that. You don't believe there's anything like that up there, sitting on a cloud. So it can't be realm 1 because nobody's ever observed God. It can't be realm 2 because the analogies are very bad. It must be realm 3. God must be an agent of some kind, unobservable by us. But when we're talking about evidence for theology, we're talking about the evidence of things in the universe that make us think that this is a good hypothesis, if you think so. Just as the evidence for electrons is what you can observe, but you can't observe electrons. You say, something must be making this happen. Something must be making these little pieces of paper jump up. And so you have 3 different kinds of, different realms of knowledge, 3 different kinds of knowledge. Knowledge by observation, knowledge by analogy, and knowledge by hypothesis. And they're quite different. The most important one, I'm sure you will agree, is the last one. That's where the ultimate explanations lie, don't they? That's where you really want to go. And that's what physics is all about. In my youth, when I was a mathematical physicist, that's what I was interested in. And that's what my friends who are in mathematical physics to this day are interested in. You've heard of quantum mechanics, I'm sure. That's what it's all about. Things you can't observe. Hypotheses about the natural agents which drive the universe. Electricity, magnetism, and gravity. And there are 1 or 2 others. So that's the story of the way in which our knowledge develops. And when Dr. Yu talks about ways of knowing, principles of knowing, then if she says, well, some of these ideas come from Ram Harre, I'm Ram Harre, that's the ideas. Yeah? So, you see the basis of this. Okay, now I'm going to talk later, not tonight, it's getting on time, and I've been up for days, We're going to talk another time about how this works out in psychology and sociology and social sciences. Economists need psychology. They particularly need social psychology. And there's an application of all this to the psychological realm. And I will talk about that difference between behaviorism, which is here, the kind of psychology we want, human agency, is here. Okay, so that's it for now. And you're in charge. Take it over.
We can take a time. Okay, how about this? Give them the time for 5 minutes.
Yes, give them the time.
Rather than question or comment.
Yes, of course.
Okay, you have 5 minutes, so write down your question or comment, and after that, it's your turn to give a comment.
Very good.